Hello, welcome. This is Zastrow, Module 4, Prominent Specific Intervention Techniques, Milieu Therapy, Parental Education, and Parent Effectiveness Training. So that is a long title for this chapter, but we're going to talk a little bit about a few other different types of therapy that you may or may not have heard of. The first one we're going to start with is milieu therapy. So milieu therapy is using events in everyday living as the context tools to treat emotional and behavioral problems. I like to think of milieu therapy as, your actual living environment. So you're learning your therapy in your living environment, so to speak. Um, does milieu therapy use a particular approach? Is it like a specific type of therapy like some of the other ones that we've learned? No, it is not. It is more a combination of other therapies such as reality therapy, behavioral therapy, rational therapy. It does have some focus on the individual as a part of the milieu, which is their living area, and others on group, some on teaching, and some may use like a token economy. And it's frequently used in a multidiscipline team approach. To give you more of a real life example of like a milieu therapy, when I relate this story back to when I worked with the adjudicated juveniles in a male sex offender facility, they would have a place where they lived, and it was actually called the milieu, and that was where they lived. Then they would have school, they would have therapy, we would do groups, all kinds of different things. But when they were upstairs on their milieu, they actually would have groups up there too. So this might have been a form or an example of milieu therapy. And it also had a multidiscipline approach because it had therapists, it had teachers, there was psychiatrists that would come and visit them, there was a nurse on hand. Excuse me. So that was, probably the best real life example I could give you of this. I'm not sure if you will hear this term a lot out in the field. I know that I was unfamiliar with even what the word milieu meant until I worked at my previous job. So just letting you know that it's out there, but it may not be as common. And again, because it encompasses other types of therapies too. But I wanted to help explain it a little bit more. So continuing on with milieu therapy, there is group interaction. The community comes together to discuss what is going on, such as common problems. In their groups that they did at the juvenile facility, they would have like a goals group or like a conflict group. So they had a chance to kind of talk about the peers on their unit and if they had issues with those particular peers. So that's an example there. And it also has flatter authority relationships. Like there's not like a hierarchy in the milieu. Types of clients that this might work with: juvenile delinquents. We explained that. Mentally ill, drug and alcohol abusers, emotionally disturbed children, prisoners, and those on probation or parole. So you may see other forms of this in a prison setting too, as I had just mentioned, or possibly maybe like a state hospital, something like that. I feel like you're going to see this more in a residential facility versus in an outpatient type setting. Again, because milieu being their living environment. Um, so some other examples that I had in my notes to kind of give you examples of would be like jail halfway houses, therapeutic communities, sheltered workshops, nursing homes, residential treatment group homes, therapeutic camping programs, partial hospitalization, or like a psych hospital. So that is milieu therapy. Our next therapy that we're going to talk about is psychodrama. So psychodrama is like a role play. It involves drama, action therapy. It is a way to kind of act things out that are going on. It could be helpful. Moreno is the creator, thought that it was a way to express pent-up feelings and emotions, and believed to be helpful because those who really want to make changes have the opportunity to role play their situations and how they are going to fix it and get feedback about it before they actually enact whatever it is that they plan on doing. I think that role plays are definitely useful. I know that I've used role play several times in therapy, individual sessions, as a chance for my clients to be able to kind of, work out the issues that they were having, get feedback from me, and then they could go ahead and act it, and then we could bring back and talk about it. So that could also be used. Also, this is a fun technique that you could use in a group therapy too, because you would have lots of actors in a group and you guys could act out different role plays there. I have used that in group therapy as well, and it does work pretty nicely, depending on whatever topic it is that you're using it on. In group therapy, you might be able to use it. We did quite a few different ones. I know I've done a drug and alcohol one, like, okay, well, what would you do in this setting? Like if you were being peer pressured to use drugs and alcohol. So that's one example. The next therapy is play therapy. It's pretty much what it says, play therapy. This is a particular therapy that would be really good to use with children because for children, play is the most natural form of self-expression. So they can act out their issues through playing. So this one might be more so for children than adults, but maybe you have some adults that would enjoy play therapy as well. You never know. Therapists can use a range of non-directive to directive play therapy. They can incorporate reality therapy, rational therapy, and behavioral therapy. So you could be pretty vague when you give them an assignment with play therapy, or you could be more directive and say, well, act out, what happened. I think sometimes, like, the first example that comes to mind for me when I think about play therapy might be if you're working with a small child that has been sexually abused and they have a doll and they can kind of act out what happened with their abuser, because it's not as, it may not be as difficult for them to kind of talk about those things if they were just acting it out with dolls. Again, because it's a more natural way for them to kind of express themselves through play versus maybe talking about it. But it can be used for other things. It doesn't have to be used just for that. So we have parental education and the parent effectiveness training. So why are we covering this? It's useful for parents and kids that you will be working with and referring people to. And it might be useful in your own relationships, not just with kids, but with other people that you relate to in dating, marriage, and at work. So we're just going to go over it a little bit just to kind of help prepare you for the field or life. The founder of this parental education piece was Thomas Gordon. And the concepts of this is that parents can and should be real, not always consistent, not always accepting, and having feelings. In two-parent families, one may accept and the other not accept the same behavior. Acting as if both are equally accepting is false and hard to carry off and not that useful. Consistency is an impossible ideal. Kids aren't consistent, and why should we be told that adults always are? One of the main concepts, or a simpler concept than what I had just read to you, is let the kid own the problem if at all possible. Then they will come up with or share responsibilities for the solutions. And you could share in that responsibility for solutions with them as well. So this is telling you that you don't have to be consistent, and you're not always accepting, and pretty much being real with your kids, being real with people, because we are human and we make mistakes, or we have error, or our feelings change, or our actions change. So I think that Gordon is saying that we just need to be real in our relationships with other people. So some techniques on how you could do this or follow this type of effectiveness training. The first one would be active listening. Imagine you tell your parents that you've decided to drop out of school. What would their response be? Active listening is better than the usual lecture or advice approach. It allows people to hear the message, understand the message, put it in your own words to show that you understand the message, check it out, do not send your own message back. It results in solutions more of the time too, if you're actively listening. And, we mentioned this before when we were talking about listening, is you want to watch parroting. You don't want to just repeat every single word back to them, because that isn't going to be helpful either. You could try it with a kid who comes to you telling you that you never listened to them and that you are always telling them what to do, or a partner who tells you that you never spend time with them. So I think active listening is also, like we had mentioned previously, is kind of just listening to what they're saying and building off of what they're saying. So you could try this just not only in your therapy sessions, but working with other relationships in your life as well. The second one is I messages. And these are, I always try to think about these messages whenever I communicate to people. You're less likely to produce defensiveness in arguments when you use these statements. And it has a simple formula that you use. I feel whatever, when you whatever, because whatever. So let me give you a better example, but that's the formula. I feel when you, because. So I feel frustrated when you don't listen to me because I feel like my opinions aren't being heard. So what you're doing is you are asserting your feelings in the statement without completely putting the blame on the other person, but you are effectively communicating that, hey, there's an issue with our relationship. I don't like what you're doing, and I don't feel that it's being productive. So I statements work really well at kind of communicating, but not totally putting the blame on somebody else. So you could have work with that with yourself or work with that with your clients too. I've done that in a lot of sessions, especially when I have clients that might be narcissistic or clients that just really want to take no blame at all. So I encourage them to say, well, I feel this way because of this situation, or I'm sorry, kind of using the formula wrong, but I feel, whatever feeling when this situation happens because for whatever their reason is. But it's definitely an effective way to communicate with others. So, let's see here. It contrasts with a usual message that you might say to someone, like, here is my solution. I think you should do this. Or if you order or command someone to do this, well, you had better cut the grass or whatever it is. And it allows you to not blame, ridicule, criticize, or name call someone. And other statements that we tend to use, especially when we're arguing with someone, we start with you rather than starting with I. So it kind of puts you into the situation too and helps you take responsibility for whatever's going on. And if you're using you statements, it could often end in arguments with other people too. So you're kind of reducing that. I messages communicate how you are affecting me, and they are non-blaming. They're also more likely to result in shared responsibility for doing something about the problem, and they communicate trust that you will. So I encourage you to try it out in your own life and see how it works out for you. There is an exercise in the Zastrow chapter on page 481 about I messages and you messages to help you out. The third thing we are going to talk about is no-lose problem solving, win-win. There are two typical approaches to this. Parent wins and the child gives in, and that would result in a loss for the child, or the parent gives in and that's a loss for the parent and the child wins. With a no-lose approach, each person treats the other with respect, neither uses power, and it results in more motivation of the child and requires less enforcement. Identify needs of each person and generate alternative solutions. Creativity is good. You will evaluate the alternative solutions, decide on the best one that is acceptable to both parties, work out ways to implement, and evaluate to see how it worked. So those are the win-win strategies, no-lose strategies that you could try. Also on page 483, there is an exercise for that to kind of help you understand that a little bit more. And last but not least, we have resolving collisions of values. Everybody's doing it in your old fashion. Especially true as kids get older, teens and young adults particularly. Parent models values that they hold important to them. So actions speak louder than words. Congruence between behavior and values is important if you want a kid to like you or listen to you, for that matter. Parents act as consultants to the teen, and if the teen wants advice. Parent is open to modifying their own values, or if not, at least moves toward understanding why the teen holds their value. So you're kind of, to simplify what I had just said to you, I would say more or less maybe leveling the playing field with them. And, it's like a give and take relationship. So you have to give a little and take a little. You want to, you're still the parent in the situation, but you're still kind of, maybe if your values aren't really working and you guys are just continuing to butt heads, kind of working to maybe not change their values, but adjust them for the situation. may or may not be helpful in whatever situation you're working on, but it's an option out there for you. All right, well, that is the end of the Zastrow module, and actually all of the modules and chapters that you will read from the Zastrow kind of extra work that I have for you. So thank you for watching.